Hey everybody, Jimmy Smith, breaking down Blachowicz versus Jacare, UFC Fight Night. Now this is a Fight Night card, so as you would expect, the top three fights have some name value in them. The bottom two are basically UFC newcomers, or not newcomers, but guys trying to find their place in the division in the UFC. So I'm going to drive by the first two and then go in depth, especially on Jacare versus Blachowicz, very loaded fight with real consequences for both fighters. But we start out at the bottom of the card. Marcus Perez, Wellington Turman, both about in the same position in their careers. Marcus Perez, 12-2. Turman is 15-3. So they're both experienced, but there's a real contrast in styles here to me. And Perez, to me, is an opportunistic kind of fighter. Skills on the ground, has a submission win over Ian Heinisch, can knock you out, but he takes advantage of you making a mistake. He finds the vulnerability in you. He catches you at a point where maybe your defense gets a little overextended or you make a mistake on the ground and he capitalizes. He's an opportunistic kind of fighter. The problem is, to me, Wellington Turman, of course, came up short against Carl Roberson, late notice in his UFC debut. Close fight, though. And he relies on his grappling. He relies on his ability to bully opponents and kind of wear them down and put pressure on them. The problem is, for Perez, is that kind of style doesn't lend itself to huge mistakes. The grinders, the people who keep it safe and are positional, don't often give you a chance to get back into a fight. Fighters who are wild and like to brawl and take one to give one, they give you a lot of opportunities to finish them. And Perez, so far in his career, has kind of relied on those opportunities. I don't think Turman gives him that opportunity. I think it's going to be a very close fight, but I think Turman kind of plays the bully in this fight, works for submissions, and doesn't really give Perez the opportunity to get back into the fight with one of his finishes. So I would go Turman by decision. That would be my pick. I think it's going to be a close fight, hotly contested for sure, but my instincts go with Turman a little bit. Antonio Arroyo versus Andre Muniz. They're both veterans of Dana White's Contender Series. They both were excellent on the regional circuit, but Arroyo 9-2, Muniz 18-4, so he's a bit more experienced. How will that play into this fight? That's the big difference to me. Now, Arroyo tends to use his sizes as that's kind of his trump card, but stylistically they're totally different. Arroyo's the kickboxer. Muniz is the wrestler, the submission artist. So to me, I think it's a matter of Arroyo trying to use his size to get in and use his power as a kickboxer. But to me, that favors the grappling of Muniz. I think Muniz, being a little bit more experienced, he doesn't let the big lights of the big fight get to him, is patient, much like my first pick. I'm going with a person who's maybe patient, can slow the fight down, might make it a grind, might make it more positional, and maybe a little bit more boring, but I think that's what he needs to win. My pick would be Muniz either by submission or by decision in a long fight. So that's the first two. Now we're getting into the fights that actually have a lot more name value to them. There's a lot more consequences. Charles Oliveira versus Jared Gordon. If you ever had a chance to talk to Jared Gordon, which I did, I called his fight when he fought on the Cowboy versus Medeiros card and ended up losing by TKO on that one. But had a chance to speak to him, and he's a very confident fighter, really believes in himself, aggressive, willing to go through hell to get a win, has a lot of faith in his stand-up, his kickboxing. The difficulty he's going to have, and if you know his backstory, everything he went through outside the octagon, the guy's just mentally and physically tough. But he likes to take real estate away from his opponents. That's not always a bad thing, being the pressure guy and moving forward. I think it plays to the takedown and the submission strength of Charles Oliveira. That's the difficulty. He's not a wait in the back and work the jab and make you come to him and throw tight combinations. He likes to step forward and bang. He likes to step forward and be the aggressor. Charles Oliveira is one of the greatest submission artists in UFC history in terms of his ability to finish. He passed, I called this fight in Brazil, I think he set the record for most submissions in UFC history. The guy just gets it done on the ground. He was also one of those guys, especially early on in his career, where I thought there's no way a guy this talented is going to choke at the elite level. I couldn't believe what I was seeing in terms of 2 steps forward, 1 step back all the time. That was the hallmark of his career early on. Now, I've read some criticisms about how the UFC handled him early, meaning he fought Jim Miller, Donald Cerrone, Cub Swanson, Frankie Edgar, a lot of veteran names early on in his career. And that kind of set him back a little bit. That, just when he was kind of developing, right now he's only 30 years old, and this was a while ago, 2010, 10 years ago, he's fighting Jim Miller, he's fighting Donald Cerrone, just getting started, a young kid. And you could argue that set him back a little bit, but, they didn't cut him. So they kept him around even after losses to big names early, and he showed real potential. Went on some win streaks. Biggest name in that streak was Jeremy Stevens in his first win streak. Then after that, Clay Guida, Jim Miller, rematch with Nick Lance. I think we're starting to see him really hit his stride. And that's bad news to me for Jared Gordon. So Charles Oliveira probably gets his fight on the ground, probably works his submission game. That's how I see this fight ending, is Charles Oliveira by submission. The problem is, and the best example is a Paul Felder fight. He was owning Paul Felder, owning him. Then Felder got on top, started landing elbows, and he completely fell apart. He's a momentum fighter. And if you can take the momentum from him, you can beat him. If Jared Gordon is able to weather an early storm or step forward and hurt Charles Oliveira early, you might see that mental test that so far Charles Oliveira has always failed. He's always passed the tactical test. If he gets in good position, if he starts hurting you, you're in trouble. He's a confidence fighter. When it starts going his way, the momentum, he will take you all the way to submission. The way to derail that, if Jared Gordon can land a big punch early, or get positional dominance early and avoid a couple submissions, start landing some ground and pound, Charles Oliveira has a problem where once things aren't going his way, he kind of collapses mentally. So if I'm Jared Gordon, I'm looking to land, be careful, but land something big early or get positional dominance early and make Charles Oliveira question himself. Because that's always been his problem. With all the talent he has, he's had issues with his ability to stay mentally focused in big fights. So I'm going with Charles Oliveira by submission, but if Gordon can hurt him early, he can change the tenor of this fight right away. Mauricio Shogun Rua versus Paul Craig. Look, Mauricio Shogun Rua, if you remember his Pride days, one of the greatest of all time. That run in Pride was amazing. A champion in the UFC, but never had the success he had in Japan. End of a certain era of the UFC, and it was the rise of John Jones. Since then, win some, lose some, but was on a great streak. Defeated Little Nog, John Volante, and then lost to Anthony Smith, got back on track against Tyson Pedro. My question in this fight, and the thing I'm really looking at is Paul Craig, big guy at 205, but he's a submission guy. That's what he's really great at. What I would wonder about at this point in his career is, can Shogun Rua walk forward and take big punches like he used to? My instincts tell me no. It's hard to finish this guy by submission. That's always been tough to do. Of course, the last time it was Chael Sonnen, got him with the guillotine in 2013. But I think Paul Craig, that's going to be the issue. That if he were a step forward and banging kind of guy, if he were exceptionally technical or fast, Shogun Rua at his age would have trouble with that kind of style. I think Shogun Rua is the kind of guy who can avoid the submission game of a guy he knows that's your strength. I think he kind of got caught against Chael Sonnen and didn't respect the game. I think he respects it against Paul Craig. And so Paul Craig's strength, which is a submission game, might not be the right strategy even against a faded Shogun Rua. Right? So stylistically, I would give Shogun Rua the advantage. It's hard to catch a slick, savvy, experienced guy, which is what Shogun Rua still has, even though he's over the hill. So the problem I would have, and why I would give Paul Craig some hope here, is when the cliff comes in MMA, it is steep, and it is brutal, and it is deadly. And we don't know when that's coming for Shogun Rua. He could walk into this fight. Remember, he hasn't fought since the end of last year. It's been a long layoff. You don't want long layoffs at this age. So he could walk in and collapse in the first round easily. Take a couple punches. He doesn't have a chin anymore, and he's just gone. With the number of fights he's been in, the wars he has been in, let's not forget the gym wars. Remember, he came up through the shoot box system. He might just not have it anymore. Now, of course, he beat Tyson Pedro, but at his age, with the career he has had, you never know when that end is coming, and it could come in this fight. I think if Shogun Rua is the same guy who beat Tyson Pedro last time out, I think he avoids the submissions and probably wins by decision or late knockout. If he isn't Shogun Rua anymore, we're going to know very early, and Paul Craig takes him out quickly. Right now, my pick is Shogun Hua, probably late, either late knockout or by decision. I think he avoids a submission game and is savvy enough to stay in the fight. But if at 37 years old he's had one war too many, man, we're going to know fast. And the problem is that me and no one else, only his teammates left. I don't know that. So right now my pick is that he's enough of the old Shogun Hua to stay out of trouble and win the fight. So the next one is Jan Blachowicz, Jacare Souza. What's important to keep in mind for this fight is Jacare, Chris Weidman, Luke Rockhold didn't leave 185 because they wanted to. They left 185 because they were losing. And that is an incredibly important distinction to make about it's a matter of, well, you didn't leave because you wanted to. You got pushed out of the division. So sometimes fighters move up in weight class and it really rejuvenates them. Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos have done very well at 205. They weren't kicked out of the division. They weren't leaving 185 because they didn't think they'd get a title shot. I believe that's why Jacare is leaving. Right? He lost to Jacare Manson. He figures, I'm not going to get a title shot at 185. It's time to move up. Also, he never had trouble with the weight cut like Luke Rockhold did. Now, Luke Rockhold had trouble making it all the time, so you could say physically maybe 205 would fit him better. Jacare, a big 185er, but never a guy who had a big struggle with the cut. So I don't think he'll be physically rejuvenated and a different guy at 205. Obviously, world-class jiu-jitsu, excellent striking. He's just looked flat in his last few fights. Obviously, the loss to Jacare Manson, but Chris Weidman, he was losing that fight until the end. Kelvin Gastelum ran out of gas at the end. So it's been kind of one step forward, one step back. Setback to Robert Whittaker. It's been win one, lose one since 2017. So he's looked flat in the losses he's had. He can't afford that now. And also mentally, new weight class. This might be the end of my career if I lose. There's got to be a lot on his shoulders. So I'm a very tough fighter. Mentally, Jacare might not be in a great place. I don't know if this weight class rejuvenates him or if he says, oh my God, this is my last chance. I don't want to see that. He has tremendous skills, but once again, his last few fights, he hasn't put them together completely. If he came out with everything he knows how to do, he can win. He's one of the best in the world. But you know, if he's doubting himself, if something goes slightly wrong, that's going to be tough. Also, the major advantage he has over Jan Blachowicz and virtually anyone else at 185 and 205 is a phenomenal ground game. Jan Blachowicz is a big light heavyweight. It's going to be hard to take him down. He's savvy. He's good on the ground in his own right. Of course, 9 wins by submission in 24 fights. You're no slouch. And he has a great jab. So what I think is going to happen is Jan Blachowicz out-jabs him, keeps him at range, keeps him at distance, makes him dive for takedowns that are going to be tough to get, and he, for all of his physical talent, will have trouble taking down a bigger guy who can control the range with his jab and who's experienced at the weight class. I think he has trouble with that. I think it's the same as Weidman and Rockhold. I think he has trouble at 205. So, and I really like Jacare professionally and personally, really nice guy. He's had a great career, but he doesn't have the physical rejuvenation at 205 that I think you need. Unless it makes him feel that much better. He always made weight at 185. I didn't see it as, wow, I'm going to feel way better at 205. And Blachowicz is a very tough fighter. And the way he controls range, I think Jacare has a lot of trouble. So I hate to say it, but I think it's Jan Blachowicz. He wins this one probably by KO late, maybe 4th or 5th round against Jacare. Jacare tries for a lot of takedowns, isn't able to get them, and Blachowicz makes it about his striking. I'd love to see Jacare be successful at 205. I think he's a great addition to the weight class. Skill-wise, if he can put it all together, he could really be dangerous. But I don't see it happening against Blachowicz. So Jacare moves up to 205, but I don't see it really rejuvenating his career, unfortunately. So those are my picks, and I'll be back after the fight to go over what I got right and what I got wrong. Enjoy.